Welcome to our deep dive today. We've got some really fascinating source material to explore, all about the 6 days of creation, as told in the book of Genesis.
Huh.
I have to say, just looking it over, it's really sparked my curiosity.
It's one of those stories, it's resonated with people for literally thousands of years.
And you know what really jumps out at me? It's this idea of a gradual creation.
Yeah, a step-by-step unfolding.
It makes you wonder, why 6 days? Why not just, boom, everything all at once?
Right. Why not instantaneous creation? It's a great question.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, scholars have been pondering this for ages, but one interpretation is that it's about intentionality.
Okay,
Like an artist carefully crafting a masterpiece, Each step is deliberate.
so it's not just what's created, but the way it's created, right?
Exactly. There's a process.
And for the people hearing this story thousands of years ago, do you think maybe that gradual process helped them grasp the sheer scale of it all?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, imagine hearing the story for the first time. It gives you time to absorb each element, to really marvel at each creation.
Okay, so let's actually dive into those 6 days. Day one starts with something pretty fundamental,
Yeah.
light and darkness.
Right. The separation of light from darkness?
That duality just feels so central right from the very beginning.
Absolutely. Light and darkness, they're powerful symbols. I mean, think about how many cultures and religions use them.
What do you think they represent in this context?
Well, light often represents knowledge, goodness, divine presence, while darkness can symbolize the unknown, chaos, the absence of the divine.
So it's more than just physical light being created here, right? It's
Right.
like God is bringing order from this primordial state, establishing this fundamental duality.
I think that's a really insightful observation. It's a theme that we still grapple with today. Light and darkness, order and chaos.
And then on day two, God creates an expanse, separating the waters from waters below.
Yes, and that's often interpreted as a formation of the sky.
The separation of heavens and earth.
Afa.
Another layer of structure added to this emerging world.
Like pieces of a puzzle falling into place.
And then on day three, dry land appears.
Yes, the waters gather and reveal the dry land, which is then called Earth.
It's amazing to think this is where our story begins, human history.
And it's significant that the land emerges from the waters. In a lot of creation myths, water represents the sort of primordial chaos before creation takes place.
And we're seeing that theme again, order emerging from chaos.
Exactly. Habitable spaces being created where life can eventually flourish.
Like a stage being set for what's to come.
And what comes next is spectacular. Day 4. The luminaries. The sun, moon, and stars.
It's like the universe is coming alive with light. But these celestial bodies, they're not just for decoration.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
The text even mentions their function for signs and for seasons and for days and years.
They establish order and rhythm, a way to measure time.
Exactly. Essential for life on Earth.
And with the sun and moon, we have day and night, echoing that initial separation of light and darkness from day one.
Beautiful parallel, isn't it? This creation narrative, it's full of interconnected themes like that.
It's like a tapestry, everything woven together.
And then on day 5, things get really lively. God creates the fish and birds, filling the waters and the skies with life.
It's like this explosion of life. And each creature has its place in this grand scheme.
The text describes the waters as teeming with creatures.
But there's still one crucial element missing, right?
Yes, and that brings us to day 6, the culmination of the creation narrative, land animals and humans.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because it's not just any creation. The text says, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness."
Arguably the most discussed and debated part of the entire creation account. What does it mean to be made in God's image?
Right. Is it physical resemblance, or is it something deeper?
Well, most interpretations lean towards something much deeper.
So what are we talking about here?
Think about the qualities we associate with the divine. Reason, creativity, love, compassion.
So it's not about looking like God, it's about reflecting some aspect of God's essence.
Exactly. And it really sets humanity apart.
Implies a unique relationship between humans and the divine.
Absolutely. And it raises questions about our purpose, our responsibilities.
Speaking of responsibilities, the text goes on to say that God gave humans dominion over all other creatures.
Yes, a concept that feels especially relevant today.
Right. Dominion. It's a loaded word, particularly given our current environmental challenges.
It really is. We have to unpack what that meant in its original context and what it means for us now.
Okay, so we've covered these first 6 days, with each day adding this new layer to creation. But there's clearly so much more to explore,
Oh, absolutely. We've only just scratched the surface.
especially these themes of what it means to be made in God's image, what dominion really implies.
Absolutely. And I think looking at the text from a literary and symbolic perspective can give us even more insight.
Okay, so for everyone listening, make sure to join us for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll explore all of this further.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the 6 days of creation.
It's amazing how much there is to unpack in this story, isn't there?
It really is. We just scratched the surface in part one.
Yeah, we did. Okay, so we talked about this gradual unfolding of creation, light and darkness separating, the sky and the earth forming, the sun and the moon and the stars all taking their places.
And then, of course, life, all those creatures in the water and then in the air and then finally on the land.
But, I keep coming back to this question of why this step-by-step process? Why not just create everything at once, in one grand gesture?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's a question that invites a lot of interpretations. Some scholars think it's highlighting this idea of intentionality,
Okay.
that each stage is deliberate, it has a purpose.
Like a composer writing a symphony.
Exactly.
Each note, each movement, it's all carefully chosen for a specific effect.
Right. Or think about a sculptor meticulously shaping a form. It's not just about the finished product, it's about the process. It's about the unfolding.
And for the people hearing this story, thousands of years ago, for the first time, do you think maybe this way of telling it, this gradual unfolding, made the vastness of creation more digestible, easier to grasp?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, picture it. You're hearing this for the first time. Each element is revealed, and you get to marvel at it. And then the next one comes.
It's like a journey, a story that unfolds over time.
Yeah, building suspense and wonder with each day.
And I think that sense of wonder is so important to why the story is so powerful. But there's also this whole other layer to consider, the symbolic dimension.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, you see, some scholars believe that those 6 days, they might represent something beyond just a literal timeline.
Okay, so what do you mean?
Well, some people see it as symbolizing spiritual development, kind of like a journey of consciousness.
So it's not just about the universe being created, but about an ongoing process of transformation, of growth.
Exactly. And it's an idea that a lot of different spiritual traditions connect with, this idea that creation isn't just a one-time event, but this continuous unfolding.
I like that. It adds a whole new dimension to the story.
It really does.
Yeah.
It makes you think about not just the how of creation, but the why.
Right, and maybe even the who.
Exactly. Where do we fit into this? And that brings us back to that pivotal verse we talked about earlier. Let us make man in our image according to our likeness.
Oh man, that line always gives me chills. It's so profound and yet so mysterious at the same time.
It really is. It's captivated theologians and philosophers for centuries. What does it really mean to be made in the image of God?
Is it a physical thing? Like, do we literally look like God? Or is it, like you said, something deeper?
Yeah, while some interpretations have focused on physical attributes, most point to something much more profound.
So give me some examples. What kind of qualities are we talking about?
Well, think about what we usually associate with God. Reason, creativity, compassion, our ability to love.
So it's not about physical appearance. It's about our capacity for these things, reflecting them.
Exactly. It's about our inner being, our potential for higher thought, for understanding. And it suggests this incredibly special connection between humanity and God.
It's like we're given this spark of the divine, a reflection of God's own being.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And with that connection comes a profound responsibility.
And that takes us to the idea of dominion, right? A word with so much baggage, especially today.
Yes, dominion. God gives humans dominion over the fish and the birds, everything on earth. But how do we understand that concept now, especially with everything going on in the world?
Right, because dominion, you could easily interpret that as a license to just exploit everything.
Yeah, and that's why understanding the original Hebrew word rada is so important. It can mean to rule, but also to care for, like a shepherd.
So it's not about tyrannical control, it's about stewardship, taking care of things.
That's a key interpretation, especially now that we understand how interconnected everything is.
Because if we're really made in God's image, wouldn't that suggest we have an obligation to protect creation?
It's a powerful connection. It makes us think about our role in the world in a whole new way.
And, it's interesting to think about this idea of stewardship in light of Genesis 1.28,
Yeah.
where God specifically says, Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.
It's a verse that has sparked a lot of debate, but it speaks to this fundamental truth that we're not separate from nature, we're part of it.
And the choices we make affect everything else.
So how do we reconcile this ancient concept of dominion with what we know about our responsibility to the environment today?
Right, that's the question, isn't it?
Maybe it's about recognizing that true dominion isn't about power and control, but about recognizing how interconnected everything is, making choices that promote harmony,
Yeah.
sustainability.
It's about shifting from a mindset of exploitation to a mindset of caretaking.
Exactly. It's about honoring creation, about preserving it.
And that brings us to the end of the sixth day, when God looks at everything and says, "It is very good."
It's not just a casual observation, it's like this powerful affirmation. Everything has inherent value, beauty.
It's like a seal of approval, right?
Yeah.
The whole world is fundamentally good.
And that's something I think we really need to remember today, especially when it's so easy to focus on all the bad stuff.
Yeah, it's a reminder to look for the good, to nurture it, to protect it.
We're all part of this very good creation. We have a responsibility to live in a way that honors that.
And, thinking about this idea of very good makes me wonder about the significance of God declaring that creation is complete, especially when we're also talking about creation as this ongoing process.
That's a really interesting point. Maybe very good doesn't just mean the end, but a beginning, a foundation.
Yeah, like a foundation on which we're invited to build, to continue the work of creation in our own lives.
Exactly. And that's something to really think about as we move into the final part of our deep dive.
I can't wait. So for everyone listening, be sure to join us for part 3, where we'll explore the enduring relevance of this ancient story.
Yeah.
Welcome back to our deep dive. It's really amazing to me how this ancient creation account, it still sparks so much discussion, so much reflection, even today.
Yeah, it speaks to the power of the story, its relevance, even after all this time.
Totally. We've covered so much already, the step-by-step creation, the meaning of light and darkness, what it means to be made in God's image, and this whole idea of dominion and what it means for us now.
Yeah, we've been through a lot.
And for this final part, I'd love to dig into something you mentioned earlier, how the story is told, the way it's structured.
Right. The literary and symbolic dimensions, there's a whole other layer of meaning there.
Okay, I'm ready. Tell me more.
Well, you have to remember, this story was passed down orally long before it was written down. So every word, every image, the way things repeat, it was all designed to really stick with people.
Like each element has a purpose.
Exactly. It's like a tapestry, Every thread, every color adds to the whole picture. Take, for example, that phrase, "and God said."
It's so simple, but so powerful.
It's not just a stylistic thing. It really emphasizes this idea that God's will, his power, it's expressed through language, through words.
Like speech itself is an act of creation.
Exactly. And you see this idea in other cultures and traditions too. Words have power. They can shape reality.
So when we read, "and God said, let there be light," and there was light, we're not just hearing about something physical happening.
It's divine will being put into action through words.
Which makes you think about the power of our own words, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We can create, we can inspire, but we can also destroy with words. The Genesis story reminds us of that.
And there's that other phrase that keeps coming up, "and God saw that it was good," after every stage.
Right. It's this constant reassurance. Everything that's created, it has inherent goodness, beauty.
And then at the end of the sixth day, that final statement, "God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good."
It takes it to another level, doesn't it? It's like a seal of approval on the entire creation.
A statement that everything, the whole world, is good, fundamentally.
And I think that's such an important message for us to remember, especially now when there's so much negativity in the world.
Yeah. It's a reminder to look for that goodness, to hold on to it, to protect it.
We're all part of this very good creation, and I think that should shape how we live our lives.
Well said. Wow, this has been such a fascinating deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of this ancient story.
Me too. It's incredible how much depth and wisdom is packed into just these few verses.
And for everyone listening, I hope you've enjoyed this journey of exploration as much as we have.
Absolutely. The 6 days of creation, it might be an ancient story, but it still has something to say to us today, no matter who we are or where we come from.
It makes you think about our place in the world, our responsibility to all of creation, the inherent goodness of everything around us. It's a call to action, to live with intention, to use our words for good, to appreciate the beauty of the world.
Beautifully said. And on that note, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the very heart of creation.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep discovering.